Hi, welcome back to the gwEm Embassy. I'm gwEm. This week we got an explanation video for last week's jam, which was the one with the Korg SQ-64, the DR-550 Mk2, the JP-8080 and the MAM MB33. Let's get into it. Okay, well let's break down the jam from last week. All this is being sequenced by the Korg SQ-64, which a few weeks ago actually got a firmware upgrade and it fixed the MIDI drum mapping, so the drum mappings are now stored in the projects. This has made this thing quite a lot less frustrating to use. Let's actually start by playing those drums. These are all being produced from the DR-550. They're being sequenced from the Korg SQ-64. MIDI out comes from the SQ-64 into this through box, and the sequencer in the DR-550 is not being used. It's just like a sound module. One side of the DR-550 has the kick drum and the other side has all the other instruments, so I can process them separately. So that's everything except for the kick. And there's the kick on its own. I really like the DR-550. I don't know, there's just something about it that I like. It's kind of charming and sounds pretty good. It could sound better, but I'm happy with it. With some processing, it's not too bad. So the next thing along is this MAM MB33, which is a little analog acid sound module. And this has been made for years in various forms. I remember when I first started making music at the kind of end of the 90s, this was available in a rack form. And it's recently, the last few years at least, been available in this small desktop unit, which I think is a lot better. Clearly a form factor that's more attractive to use. Now, this thing is based on the 303, and it sounds a bit like one, but it's not as close as you'd think. So it sounds pretty good with the sawtooth wave, but the square wave sounds nothing really like a 303. It definitely has that rubber bandy acid sound. It distorts a bit at the end of the volume in a really pleasing way. The way the accent is done is good, sounds a lot like a 303. So if you do a velocity over 120, then it's processed as an accented note. It pairs incredibly well with the SQ-64, and I think you can make quite convincing acid lines with it using the note slide, which is on the SQ-64. That's the first acid line, bit of reverb on there. Let's listen to the second one now. Really good. The sequencer on this is a lot like a 303 actually, because in each set of the 16 steps you can have a different note. You can do slides really easily. You can set the volume really easily for the accents. So I think this setup of the SQ-64 and the MAM MB33 is a good one for acid, especially considering this is so small and quite affordable on the second-hand market. I'll show you that square wave though. It's a bit less impressive sounding than the saw. That's the square. That's the saw. So the saw sounds good, I think. I'm not really sure about that square wave. I had a look at the schematics actually of the MB33, and it's using a 555 timer as the oscillator. Now I don't have any problem with that. I know some people turn their noses up at a 555 timer. I think it's totally fine to use one. But the fact is that a 555 timer is going to produce a very hard square wave with hard edges. And the TB303, the square wave on that isn't very square at all. So that might be where the difference is. Moving on to the next instrument now. Obviously I've got the Roland JP-8080. There's two sounds playing on that. The first one is this bass sound. Now that bass sound is 2 square wave oscillators, very slightly different pitches, which I ring modulation on, and gives it a kind of dirty, hollow sound. I'm really pleased with this bass. I didn't think the JP-8080 could do something quite as dirty as this, so I'm really pleased. The chords, I mean, there is like a virtual analog feeling in the high end of the chords, that super soft sparkle, but I think the mid-range is quite analog sounding. This is a super saw combined with pulse width modulation on the other oscillator. And then together the whole thing sounds like this. I do have a little bit of outboard gear, the Zoom RFX300, which I use in many of my jams, is providing reverb, and it sounds as good as ever. And out of shot down here, I've got the Alesis Nanocompressor, so that kind of sums up that jam, I think. Well, I hope you found that interesting and useful. Maybe you'll get some tips for your own production. If you could like the video and subscribe, that would be awesome. And I hope to see you in another video soon. Take care.